Hello everyone, it's Grandmaster Max Illingworth here, and in this video I'm going to continue my series on how to use the bishop pair advantage when the queens are traded. You see, one thing about the bishop pair is it's an advantage that tends to increase in strength as the pieces get traded off. So we'll see that in action in this game as well, which started c4, e5, knight c3, bishop b4, knight d5. It's one reason why you'll often see black play knight f6 and only then bishop b4, so that knight d5 can potentially end with knight takes d5 in the future. So here after knight d5, the bishop retreated back to e7, and after bishop e7, I believe white normally plays the move knight f3 in this position, but here he decided to play the immediate d4, which I think is also a very legitimate approach to open up the center. So black played e takes d4, queen takes d4, and after knight f6, knight takes e7, and queen takes e7, we already get this position where white has the bishop pair advantage, as black's dark squared bishop was just traded for the knight. But black gets some compensating factors in return. In particular, he has a lead in development that will increase with the move knight to c6, attacking the central queen. So the game saw bishop to g5. Black played indeed knight c6. And after queen to c3, I think that black was a little bit concerned about the fact that his pawns could get doubled with the move bishop takes f6. I'm not so sure if that's necessarily such a big threat, because A, it gives up the bishop pair, and B, black might be able to castle along anyway, so the double pawns won't weaken the king so much. But in this game here between Ian Nepomniachtchi against Viswanathan Anand from the Levitov Chess Week Rapid tournament, black played this move knight to e5, stopping the bishop to f6 quote-unquote threat. Now after knight e5, white continued with the move knight f3, just building up the piece pressure. And you might notice how, because white has an unopposed light squared bishop, that it makes sense he's mainly playing on the dark squares at the moment. Sounds, yeah, I say dark squares, I mean light squared bishop, but white's now post dark squared bishop, so therefore he's playing on the dark squares. So black played the move d6. It's an interesting question. If black plays knight takes f3, how do you think white should take back in this position? With the queen or with the pawn? So in this case, I actually think it might be better to take back with the pawn. And the reason is that not only do you kind of get a nice g-file for the attack with the rook, but also if you play queen takes, you might run into an annoying queen b4 fork. So there's a tactical as well as a positional reason to take towards the center with the pawn. So black played d6, white exchanged with knight e5. And after the move queen takes e5, in retrospect maybe d5 was also an alternative. After queen takes, we basically get to our thematic position. And you might notice here that white didn't play the move bishop takes f6. And the reason is that because the double pawns aren't on a half-open file, it's not that easy to prove they're a weakness. And meanwhile, black's sort of development will be quite easy from such a position. So white kept more pressure by instead playing the move g3, just to keep that diagonal open for the bishop. And in this position, black played bishop to e6. I think that knight e4 would also have been interesting, but it was played a move later anyhow, after bishop e6. White played the move b3, just keeping the pawn safe. Black played knight e4. And I think that both sides played it fairly well to start. So white naturally wants to keep his bishop pair advantage, so he played bishop to e3. And now black faces this sort of challenge that when you're facing the bishop pair, the challenge one faces is that if you sort of don't manage to create some counterplay, then white just has this long-term advantage and can kind of press a bit like we saw in part 1 of using the bishop pair. So I think since white wants to play bishop g2, it kind of makes sense to start with f5. And then if bishop g2, what's the move that you would play here if you were black? So you might like to pause the video and think about it for a bit. So there are a few options, and admittedly I think white is probably a bit better in any case. But I think my suggestion would be to go for a5 and try to create counterplay on the queen side with a4, perhaps keeping the king around in the center, as it were. So you might be wondering, well, should white take on e4? I'd say that may not be the best option, just because while these pawns are doubled, I think that the bishop on e6 is not so much worse than the bishop on e3. So if I was white, I might play it like f3, as we'll see in the game. So in the game, black played castles queenside. Bishop g2 was played. f5. And it's not the problem black faced with the knight is that you can't really keep it on e4. You can't move it to c3 either, because then it'll get trapped with bishop to d2. Black played the move knight f6 in the game. Maybe knight d6 is a slightly more flexible square, but I don't think it changes all that much in the position. And here white played a quite interesting bishop maneuver, actually. I was not sure whether it's necessarily the best move, but the more I think of it, the more I like it. So what might be a better diagonal for white's bishop in this position? So well done if you found this idea of bishop d2. To be fair, there are a lot of decent moves for white, where you could also just play king f2 and get your rook to the d file. But the nice thing about bishop d2 is not only are you able to play bishop c3 and attack that pawn on e5, but you can also prepare queenside castling, which is a little more efficient than playing king d2, king f2. So in that sense, you're not really losing a tempo with the bishop d2 retreat. And black doesn't have any real threats, so white having a long-term advantage, we can afford to be a bit more patient here. So black played the move e4, which in retrospect is probably not the best defense. And the reason is that I think when you have only one bishop, it makes sense to try to keep your pawns on the dark squares to try to neutralize the opponent's bishop. So that's why I think that maybe a move like knight d7 or perhaps rook e8 and then knight d7 might have been a better way to defend as black. So yeah, I have to say knight d7. I mean, white is definitely for choice here, but black doesn't have any major weaknesses, and if you play moves like g6 and b6, you can kind of sit on this position and say that it might still be holdable as such. So instead of this, reason for my hesitation is I'm considering whether it might be better for black to play bishop f7. Maybe it's a bit more precise, but the basic position will not vary too much, as it were. You could also play bishop d7 and put the bishop on c6 to anticipate f4. So a few different ways for black to defend, and I think you can already see it from my hesitance that it's not an easy position for black to defend in practice. This is for sure. So black played e4 in this position. And after queenside castling, the thing is that this pawn tension I think helps white in that if black were to take, then it would sort of help white open the position for the bishops. I suppose in this sort of position, Layla 0 might want to play h5 and just charge the rook's pawn forward. Okay, in the worst case, we could always play h4 and say that at least black's structure is not so flexible now. In the game, black played the move rook h to f8. And okay, we already remember the idea that exchanges tend to favour the side with the bishop pair with the long-term advantage. So white played, after rook h f8, he played the move bishop to c3. Black played rook takes d1. Rook takes d1. Okay, it does give up the file, though white doesn't have a good invasion point at the moment. This is not a big deal. Black played this interesting idea of playing g6. The alternative would be to play something like e takes f3 and kind of just keep the structure as it is and sort of sit on this position. Probably black didn't play this way because he didn't want to give these doubled pawns, which I admit does look very ugly for black. So if black can't really challenge a file with rook e8, I guess this position would remain quite difficult. So there's not really an easy answer, but maybe you can try something like maybe b6 and c5. Black can maybe try to grab some space and perhaps defend in this sort of way. So in the game we had the immediate g6, and in one way it's kind of a clever idea where black is sort of giving up a pawn, but if white were to take with bishop takes, rook takes, and f takes e4, it doesn't really work out very well because actually you don't win a pawn. If you haven't seen why, then the reason is after bishop e4 that black has the move rook f2, regaining the pawn and basically equalizing in this way. So that's why instead of jumping the gun, white played this move king d2 in this position. Now you could also make a case for other moves like rook to e1, with the idea of trying to prepare this idea of grabbing the pawn and trying to force black to play e takes f3 and open the file for the rook. However, king d2 is not bad either. I think also keeps a pleasant advantage. And the idea is kind of just to bring that king to a more active position and pressure the e-pawn in this way. I think Anand came up with good defense here in bishop d7, with the idea that the bishop can kind of join the defense this way. White played king to e3. And in this position, black played e takes f3, which, as we'll see, kind of, gave white... Well, it meant that black lost his space advantage in the center. The alternative would be to play a move like b6, and okay, it's not a very natural continuation at the fast time control just to give up a pawn like this. But I think if white does take, then I think that black's drawing chances are actually not that bad here. After f takes c4, black might even just be able to sit on this position with a move like rook to f7 or something. And yes, black is in a sense down a pawn for nothing, but maybe he can still keep some drawing chances. Though admittedly, I'm not that convinced at this point. So I can sort of understand why black played e takes f3, because otherwise you do just lose a pawn, basically. But then after e f3, it is a very comfortable position for white. In fact, maybe black's best chance here is to try and shift the trend of the game before it really turns against him. And one way you could consider that is to play f4. It looks very radical, but the point is that if king takes, you've got the knight d5 fork to win a piece. And if g takes f4, then you can play moves like, say, rook e8 or even bishop to f5. And yes, white is up a pawn, but at least we saw him anxious shut out the bishop. And by sort of attacking this pawn or even just seeing the knight on d7, we can at least try and make white work a bit hard to actually win this. So maybe this is the best chance, but again, it's sort of a pattern we see that because of white's bishop pair, black never really has an easy decision, where if he sits and waits, well, we'll see what happens there in the game. But if he does something radical, there is the risk that, you might just be losing with one pawn less. So after knight to h5, well, I think he wanted to play for f4, but white found a good move to anticipate this. You may like to pause the video if you want to try and find the move that Nepo played. So he played the move king to f2 in this position, with the point that if f4, well, now it just doesn't really threaten anything anymore. White could even play g4 in reply, and make the case that the f4 pawn is simply a weakness that white can attack on the dark squares as such. So instead of f4, black tried the move of bishop c6. The problem with bishop c6, I guess, is that, well, the bishop could also prove to be a target, as we'll see in the game. White first played bishop f1, just getting the bishop off this diagonal, so if white later plays f4, it won't be a trade of bishops. And now after knight to f6, well, one tip I gave in the previous video was that if you're not sure what to do in this sort of better position, then grabbing space with the pawns can be a good idea. So with that hint in mind, what might be a good move for white in this position? So well done if you played Nepomniachtchi's move of b4, with the idea of kicking the bishop off this diagonal. Certainly there are other good moves as well, like rook e1, and even h4 is not a bad idea to fix their kingside pawns in place. But b4 is somehow a move that feels nice, just to kind of ask black how it'll deal with this direct threat. in the game, black played the move b6. The engine wants to play bishop a4, but I can sort of understand why black wouldn't want to play this way. So after a rook moves, there is this quite real risk that the bishop will simply be trapped on this square. So black played b6 to try and keep the bishop on this diagonal. And then white reverted this move of rook e1, and it's kind of all about just sort of asking what are the weak points in black's position. Maybe there aren't currently any weak pawns, but these squares on e-file are vulnerable to an invasion. So black played king to d7. White kicked the bishop with b5. Okay, the key for turning white's advantage into a win from this position is basically to create some weaknesses in black's camp. So how might we create a pawn weakness in black's position? So there are a few different approaches white can go for here. The one I like best is the one Nepomniachtchi played in the game, which is to play a4 and to sort of push the a pawn and open up the position, or create this weakness on a7 to target. If you want to prepare c5, a move like bishop b4, I think that would also be a pretty good continuation that would probably be winning for white with best play. We'll kind of see a similar situation in the game, because after a4, well, I mean, allowing this pawn to a6 kind of sort of kills the bishop whichever way it goes, and fixes the a7 pawn as a weakness. So black tried to stop that with the move a6, but then this allowed a nice sort of tactic to white's advantage. And this is definitely a position where you want to pause and try to come up with the winning move for white. Okay, to be fair, it's not winning immediately, but does give a technically very big advantage. So, welcome back, and it turns out the key move for white here is to play c5, and okay, if you want to play rook d1 or bishop b4 first and throw in a tempo move, it's also possible. But I really like c5 because it puts black in a real dilemma where he's facing the threat of c6. He doesn't really want to play b takes c5, because that just gives white a very strong outside pass pawn, which black will have a hard time really dealing with in the long term. Plus, of course, his c-pawns are a bit weak and isolated. But after a takes b5, which was played in the game, white went bishop takes b5. Obviously, you can't play bishop c6 because of rook to d1. So black played c6 instead. White just retreated the bishop with bishop c4. Okay, technically it might be more precise to start with rook d1, just so that they don't have knight d5. This can meet with the rook takes d5 pin. Because here, I think black's next move was, in retrospect, probably a blunder, where I think he probably had to, instead of b takes c5, which we'll see in the next puzzle, probably had to go knight d5, and I mean, white's winning chances are still very good here, as he makes a transformative position with an extra pawn. And with the rooks on the board, it's not really a sort of, I think, drawable opposite coloured bishop endgame. But I guess this was the only way to have a chance. So after b takes c5, this is your chance to see if you can play like Nepomniachtchi did and beat Viswanathan Anand. So what would be your move for white in this position? There's only one good move, so you might like to pause the video here. So congratulations if you spotted rook b1. It sort of fits with the concept that when you have a win, it will probably involve a move that, as in a direct win, it'll probably involve a move that's either a check or a capture, or some move that threatens something, and rook b1 certainly fits that bill. And whichever way black defends, he's going to have a big problem, where if he goes bishop c8, for example, then, I mean, you can even play a move like bishop e5 and just completely dominate black's pieces. Or for that matter, you could also just push your a-pawn with a move like a5, for example. I think it'll be very hard for black to stop this pawn as such. So bishop c8, yeah, I think might be the best defense, but probably it's also not enough to save the game if white just pushes the a-pawn down the board. Because the rook can't really come and stop it, and the knight's notoriously bad at stopping the rook's pawns as well. If they try king c8, then I think in that case you can even just play a5 once again. And so just kind of get them with the bishops, where this is not a forced line, but just to give an example, there's this funny mating position where After bishop a8, white could go bishop e6, and okay, it's not quite a mate, but say if king c7, then you can play bishop e5 and kind of win with this sort of invasion, as it were. So yeah, that's basically showing that black doesn't really have a great move. He tried bishop to a8 in the game, but that allows white to win a piece with a fairly straightforward tactic, where white played bishop takes f6, and black resigned here because after bishop takes f6, if black were to play rook takes f6 in this position. Okay, my video is kind of frozen on me at the moment, or more precisely my chess space is frozen on me, but looks like we'll get there anyway. So there's a chance you to, see if you've found a solution already. So after rook takes f6, the point is that white has rook b8, and you just simply win the bishop for free, which is easy enough. So that was seeing how to use the bishop pair advantage, where we saw how white got the bishop pair straight from the opening. And for any kind of just nurse this advantage, just sort of kicking the knight away, sort of just bring the pieces in and not minding exchanges. And white's play from here, I think, was quite masterful, where he just kept grabbing space with the pawns, creating those weaknesses in black's position, and then with a bit of an accurate calculation at the end, he was able to turn in a full point. So it's a very impressive game, and after seeing this, I think it won't come as a surprise to anyone that Nepomniachtchi did go on to win this Rapid tournament with 5 out of 7, after Kramnik had previously won the Blitz version of this event on the tiebreak. So yeah, thanks for watching this video. Please leave a comment with either your feedback or any questions that you might have. And I'm really excited to see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.